Good evening and welcome to the Town of Rockland Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, March 19, 2024. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Deputy, can you start us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback by WRPS at youtube.com/WRPS Rockland. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. First on the agenda, community announcements. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. From the town clerk, Liza Landy asked me to remind voters that there is no in-person early voting or vote by mail option for this upcoming annual town election on April 13th. But if anyone is unable to go to the polls and they would still like to vote, they could still request an absentee ballot from the town clerk's office. The last day to apply for an absentee ballot is Monday, April 8th. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda, minutes from 3/5/2024. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Next on the agenda, under new business, we have 4 reappointments for the Council on Aging. I didn't ask for any of them to come in because they're all reappointments, and I think we know them all. So with that being said, unless anybody has any questions or concerns about an individual, I'll entertain a motion to approve all 4.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Also unanimous. Thank you. Next on the agenda, presentation of the capital plan. Rich Harris, Chairman, Capital Planning Committee. Rich, come on down. How are you, Rich?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm well as well. Welcome.
In your packets, you should have a copy of the current and final capital plan for the fiscal year 2025 through 2029, along with the ranking sheet for the projects that are in fiscal year 25. We've met with all of the department heads starting in January, going through all of the requests that they'll have for this year, as well as future requests to put on the plan, and where those requests should fit in based on, useful life and that kind of thing. The Capital Planning Committee is, we look at any capital project that's $50,000 or more and has a useful life of 5 years or more.
Okay.
Do you have any?
Yeah. Any newer items added to the list, Rich? I mean, I obviously see, the new fire station is still listed at the top as number 1. But anything that's come up recently?
There's a number of new projects this year. The sewer department had their continuing projects to upgrade the sewer plant. The highway department had some stuff. I know that there's a study on there to allow us to be eligible for a grant for the VFW drive through to Weymouth Street. There's the schools had their presentation, and then they recapped, took some of those things off. We have the parking lot at the police station. There's a number of things that are listed that are requests for this year. The reason the fire station is still on there is because in the event that they come up with a newer plan or an updated plan, and there happens to be a special town meeting or something like that within fiscal year 2025, we wanted to at least keep that on the plan because it is something that needs to be done. So.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Rich, are you up to a full committee right now?
Yes, we are.
You are. Good. Okay. Okay. So if nobody has any other questions or comments, Rich, thanks for your time. Appreciate all your hard work on it. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, presentation of Charter Review Committee recommendations for annual town meeting. Rich Penny, Chairman, Charter Review Committee. I've been waiting for this day for a long time.
What's that?
Getting to question you, this is great.
You've only waited, what, 15 years for this?
It's been about that time, yeah, about that.
So, Judy, come on up. So, Judy is vice chair, and I've asked her to join me as part of this, so.
We'll enjoy this too.
So, we've been working on it, so this started back, what, late 2019. We had approved funding for a third party to help on the consulting. We had started it for about maybe 2 months, and then COVID hit, and it got put on the back burner. We reinstituted this a little over a year ago, and over now what is 15, 18 years in the town. I have never worked on a committee that was as diligent, engaged, in really looking at how this could help the town. And the other part of this, I think, is using the Collins Center. Just this could not have happened without them and their expertise. A little background: they have now helped a little more than 125 communities throughout Massachusetts in reshaping or rewriting their charters. And looking at how many charters are out there, that impacts about 50% of the towns in the Commonwealth that have charters. So they have a whole lot of experience. So, you know, what the goals were was look at the existing charter, which went back to 1970, with a couple of minor changes back in the 90s and then around 2008. But for all intents and purposes, the charter was from 1970. And anyone who's been involved in the town, you know, fully understands how the charter has at times handicapped the ability to run the town. Right, because Mr. O'Loughlin with a smile on his face fully understands.
Yeah.
So we thoroughly went through this. The committee, there was 7 of us, along with the Collins Center. There was 3 members from the Collins Center, 2 of which were attorneys. And at various times, Mr. Lapp joined us, and also John Clifford at the end. So as we were doing this, we actually, in retrospect, we actually had 3 attorneys that were going through this, 2 from the Collins Center and 1 as town council, trying to make sure that, you know, how we went about this, the approach, the language. And I'll give you a little bit on the process. So when it started, we identified, through the help of the Collins Center, 10 communities throughout Massachusetts that have some similarities to Rockland. Looking at you know, the size of the town, the current structure, you know, being a town administrator, town manager, board of selectmen, looking at socioeconomics, you know, trying to find towns that matched up pretty similar. And then using their charters, using the Rockland Charter, and then also the expertise of the Collins Center, we went through every single line by line, going through this. And looking at some of the things that had worked in some other towns, taking recommendations from the Collins Center, but also always keeping in mind that the goal was to create the best charter for Rockland, not to take someone else's charter, right? So try to take best practices from others, but where it didn't make sense for Rockland, we didn't. I do also want to touch on this. So there were two areas that are not part of this, and one being the school. And the school is, it's separate, right? So goes under DESI, has its own laws, really doesn't impact. The other thing that we did not address was the Rockland Abington Joint Waterworks. So in order to do that, you actually would have to engage the town of Abington and work in conjunction. And that's something that we can look at, you know, if we think the need is there after this, we can certainly look to do that. But we didn't want that to slow down the process of looking at everything else within the town. All right. So a couple of key areas, you know, and I've heard from some residents, you know, in the past and recently, you know, one of the concerns is, you know, they don't want their vote taken away. The committee was very diligent and understanding of that. So in this proposal, the only current elected positions that would be impacted are highway, treasurer, and collector. And just so you know, the elected collector is actually the vice chair of this committee. So, and also talking with the current elected highway and treasurer, they are under the same understanding that in the best interest of the town, those important positions should have minimum qualifications, should go through a vetting process. You should go out and try to find the best candidates, and all those things. And as an appointed position, you can do that. As an elected, we know we can't, right? It's whoever happens to draw the papers. You know, some other things, we looked at all of the committees that are out there today. So whether they are elected or appointed, what we found is that as a town, we were very inconsistent on what we were asking those committees to do. So there are certain committees that there are some duties that fall under state statute, library, sewer, you know, parks, where there are certain state statutes, and those things would remain as is. What we wanted to do was standardize the boards, right? So that their duties were the same, right? And that they were advisory, they were looking out for the best interest of the townspeople, that they have a say and an impact in those departments that they would be either elected or appointed to. The biggest thing that we looked at was some of our boards today actually have the responsibility of personnel. Recruiting, hiring, firing, you know, reviewing. And being someone who has sat on now 4 different boards, always kind of one of the struggles I've always had is whether you are elected or appointed, you are a volunteer and unpaid, part-time, and your qualifications are you just need to be 18, a registered voter, and kind of want it, right? So it puts you in a position as an organization where some inconsistencies can happen. So we want to kind of take that out, where we set, you know, true policies for hiring, for vetting, for reviews, and all that. So this charter would allow that. We also updated the language on the recall process. So that was due to some learnings we had as a town back in 2018, I think it was, that several members sitting up there, including Mr. Ellard, was very much involved in. And a frustrating part was, as we were trying to go through the recall process, as laymen trying to understand what needed to be done, we went through it a couple of times, collected a whole lot of signatures, and found out at the end we need to do it again. We need to do it again, right? So we updated the language on the recall to make that process clearer. we also updated the removal and suspension of the town administrator. So again, part of that was based on real-life experiences of the town of Rockland that may not match what some other charters out, but something that we lived through, so we wanted to address it. As we went through, we looked intently at the duties and the authority of the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen. So someone who was fortunate enough to sit on the Board of Selectmen previously, and someone also who got to sit on the Finance Committee, ironically, I always felt I had more impact in this town sitting on the Finance Committee than I did as a member of the Board of Selectmen. Yet, when you ask the residents of town, everyone thinks the Board of Selectmen run the town, and the way our charter works today, that is very much not the case. So the way that we're looking at structuring this and how almost every town in the Commonwealth now has this is where the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator are the CEO of the town. You know, I'll give you an interesting, and not to ramble on, but so when we started this process, the Collins Center said, "Do you have a organization chart?" And I laughed and I said, we don't. We've attempted it before. We couldn't really put one together. And Jim from the Collins Center, "Oh, not a problem. I'll put that together for you." Like, okay, good luck. He called me 3 weeks later and he said, "I can't put an organizational chart together for your town because I've never encountered this ever." And I laughed and I said, "You're on a long list of who have tried." So what this charter would allow us to do is actually create an organizational chart. It would actually have a structure in place. There would be accountability throughout the whole organization. And at the top of that org chart is the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, right? And the way that we're structuring this, so some towns have created charters where an extremely strong town administrator, and as we looked at this, the committee all felt the same, is that we want to make sure that the townspeople have the final say. And the way that this is created is that the Board of Selectmen, by majority vote, would have final say on any proposed changes. So the town administrator would oversee the day-to-day. The department heads would report up through the town administrator. The town administrator would be responsible for the day-to-day, setting goals, reviews, all that. But for any changes, any of those things, the Board of Selectmen would have to vote off, right? So proposal by the town administrator saying this is the direction that I want to go. As long as the Board of Selectmen has a majority, then we do it. So this way, the townspeople still have final say on what happens in their town. And I think as a committee, we were very, very, it was very important for us to structure it this way. And we're very cognizant of doing that. As part of this process, if this were to pass, the steps after that there would be a bylaw review. So a 1-year in-depth review of all town bylaws. Because what can happen sometimes is that an existing bylaw may actually conflict with the new charter. So it would take a year to go through that, make sure if there are any bylaws that are conflicting, that we're able to change that. And a bylaw is much, much easier to change than a charter. And I'll explain that a little bit. A couple other minor things. So being someone who sat previously on the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom, special town meeting, right? We were limited when to call a special town meeting. And I know that there have been times in the past that a quote-unquote emergency was created so we could have a special town meeting. This will allow us, if a special town meeting is needed, you can call a special town meeting, right? Instead of creating a fake or sometimes a true
Oh, they're
emergency.
always real.
Right?
They're always real emergencies.
Exactly, right? The budget submission, so something that was always, so it had to be submitted, bunch of members, former members of the FinCom. So we would have to submit a budget by December 31st, and we knew what we were submitting, just tear it up and throw it away, because it was so early in the process. So what we're gonna do, what this is proposed to do is that the budget needs to be submitted 90 days prior to town meeting, right? So it can be submitted beforehand, but you can wait till 90 days prior. So, the thought process there is you're submitting 90 days out. It is going to be much more vetted through and much more accurate than what you give on December 31st. I mean, John, Mike, we remember sitting like, we get it, and next meeting, it's like, yeah, throw that out, here's the new one, throw it out, here's the new one.
Oh, we
right?
go through 20 copies.
Yeah, and then the last part of this is, on the charter, there's the transitional language. And the transitional language is exactly it. It directs you from how the town is governed right now until the end of the process. So, one example, the one that probably comes up the most is the treasurer collected position. So that is up for re-election this coming year. By the way, unopposed. Judy, how many times in a row have you been unopposed?
6.
There you go. So that's coming up. So that would be a 3-year term. So the transitional language would be written as such, if this does pass at town meeting, that the elected treasurer and collector would finish their 3-year terms, and at the end of their terms, that would be when the appointed combined treasurer collector position would start, right? So that's just one example of how that transitional language goes through. And part of the transitional language is reviewing the bylaws. A couple of things that we put in here. So to try to avoid going 50 some odd years between charters, is that for both bylaw and charter, there are 5-year review periods that are built into this. So, and they will be alternating years, but so every 5 years, the charter will have to be reviewed, and every 5 years, the bylaws have to be reviewed. So at least it's in the charter that requires. Now, at the end of the day, things may be going well, not a need, but at least it brings it to the attention saying, hey, we have to have a committee in place, review it, and hopefully, what we just went through doesn't have to happen, so. I'm sorry, I took all of it.
No, you didn't.
What do you got?
No, really? I'm not.
I know it's so unusual,
No,
right?
it would be redundant to reiterate what Rich just said, but one of the most pointed pieces, I think, that he hit upon was that it was a very comprehensive, collaborative effort on, which was a collection of various people that brought different nuances to the whole decision-making process. Some, like myself, that were actually acting in the role, others that were on the outskirts representing different facets of how they felt about how the process should occur. Although under the guidelines of strip away all the what-ifs, what's best for the town, why are we even sitting here collectively once a month to try to create or at least adapt a more comprehensive charter for the town. One of the things we did talk about, that we've talked about at length, that I've talked about at length with both Doug and previous assistant town administrators, is that one of the things that I find very interesting, and it's also coming from the private sector, is that the way we are constructed now is almost in a silo of sorts of different. Everyone knows what they're doing, and they're doing it very well, but collectively, the charter would allow us to engage more across the board of how are you intertwined? How does one affect the other, And in order to do that, in order to accomplish that, you need an organizational chart. You have to have accountability and functionality from the top down to the bottom. Does it mean that the elected officials are not accountable? Certainly not. My contention has always been that I have 6,158 households that are my bosses, and therefore my accountability is in that facet. Does that change moving into a more comprehensive, cohesive manner? No, it doesn't. It just means that you now are less fragmented and more governed toward where you want the town to be as a whole. And the one thing that we did talk about at length was the treasurer-collector piece. I've always felt, you could go back to my 2009 initial campaign, my initial reaction was that this should be a veritable appointed position with a resume. Check my references. Query me, make sure I can get bonded. I mean, things like that are extremely important in your financial, especially in the financial capacity of what you work in. So we wrestled with it, and we talked about it at length. Collins Center was very, very adept at not only offering us information but challenging us. Like, why would you want to go that way? Why are you looking toward, why are you hesitant? Why? So they offered assistance, but yet they also offered a challenge to make us really think about and understand that this is a pretty significant document. It's a pretty significant manner of, you're creating your town government and adapting it according to what's best for townspeople. And I think that whole thought process definitely rang clear throughout the entire committee. And so for the most part, one of the things that we were attempting to do was to basically, as you know, like I said, not to reiterate what Rich said, but to create an organization where an organization doesn't really tightly exist right now, and to maybe kind of bring into more focus accountability. And with accountability, everybody talks about transparency. Transparency and accountability, as far as I'm concerned, go hand in hand. Yes, we are accountable. We're all accountable. There's not one office in here that's not working with accountability and transparency. But we're kind of, like I said, we're kind of fragmented, and I think this is a measure toward at least bringing Rockland a little bit forward to that. We are one of 351 communities. I think there are 5 of us that still have elected treasurer collectors. We're probably the only one that doesn't have it combined.
We are.
And that is, that's something that we definitely needed to look at, and I'm thankful that I was able to give both on a private sector and a public sector comprehensive, hopefully, interpretation of how I saw it should be looking on both sides of the spectrum. So.
Anybody have any questions, comments? Or?
Yep. Well, first of all, I read through it twice, and
You didn't fall asleep?
No, I didn't. No, it was really interesting, actually. And every question I had, you guys have answered. for the most part. And I just think you guys did a fabulous job with checking all the boxes and really took your time and nitpicked and combed through and partnered with the Collins Center for guidance, and that was remarkable. So congratulations on this. I was wondering if you could go into explaining the last section, section C7.15, the topics for study, because I don't remember that being in the old charter.
What, the transitional?
Topics
That's
for-
section 7.
Oh, yeah, well, the very last one, within 90 days, like
Which one
the
exactly?
very last page.
Number 15.
Number
$7.50.
Yeah, C7-15, or dot 15. Yeah, 'cause I thought that was really interesting. And would this be changed every 5 years according to whatever the,
So, yeah,
The
so it
town
would only
needs,
be
yeah.
in the event of so if there were,
Yeah.
yeah, so in 5 years when you're doing it, in what that, and if
Okay.
there were changes to it, what the
Yep.
process would be, yeah.
okay. All right, great. And let's see, was there anything else?
So
Yeah.
obviously, when you talk about, and just say, like, when you're talking about B and C in particular, those would only be on this, that obviously you transition the highway superintendent and the treasurer and collector, you wouldn't be picking that off in the
Yeah,
future.
5 years from now, no, it's not there.
Right.
No,
So, yeah, so it gives.
but the topic for study would still be there.
Yeah, it gives that flexibility, that's good. And Judy, about transparency and accountability, currently, I mean, does a collaboration within the whole town hall come at department head meetings? Is that something that,
It comes certainly with department head meetings. It comes with the newly established, which I'm thrilled about, cross-training effort.
okay,
I think that the value of any cross-training in any department is kind of guiding people to learn, not, this is my job, this is what I do, I come in day to day and then I go home. Instead, it becomes more of an adaptation of, oh, this is how I affect the treasurer, this is how I affect the accountant, this is how the assessor creates the bills. And it becomes a more comprehensive way. So yes, in fact, department head meetings are information sharing.
Yep.
I think, I've always been a proponent of hands-on, and I think that you get that with interdepartmental cross-training and the sharing of resources between departments, and we're doing that right now and fairly successfully.
yep,
I think that lends itself to an even more, a greater adaptability, and I don't want to say, I don't want to use the word change, because I like the word adaptability. I think this whole transition stage of treasurer-collector speaks exactly to what you're asking, Laurie.
right, yeah,
I think the melding of those two positions is extremely significant, because now you're taking two complete, not disconnected, but complete different departments, and you're melding them the way they should be. So now you've got a collector treasurer at the helm, and then you've got individuals that within the transitionary phase, you have an assistant collector and assistant treasurer. Well, now they both become melded, get their certifications, and now you have an even stronger collector treasurer
right.
position.
Sure, and I also appreciate the language, because you've used select board throughout this entire thing, assuming that
I'm
will
going to be
change.
honest, we can't take credit for that.
Yeah,
So that's why there were 3 lawyers involved.
yeah, right. So hopefully the governor
We kind of
will
told
sign
them where we wanted to go, they
Yeah,
wrote it.
perfect. And my last question is about the new bylaws, or the the next year, you're going to go over the current bylaws in town. Are you going to be taking suggestions from residents?
So as part of that transition, we would look to have the Board of Selectmen create a committee
Yeah.
to review the bylaws.
Right.
So then that committee would, however you look to structure that, that
Okay.
committee would look to review all those bylaws, and part of that, there'll be interaction with town council.
Yep.
Because what you're really looking for is anything that is currently in the town bylaw that would be contradictory to what the
The
charter is.
charters, okay.
Yep.
Well, and my thought process was that it gives an opportunity for the junior high school and high school civics classes to get engaged and come up with something that they might want to see in a bylaw and bring it before the committee, so,
That's totally up, it's
okay.
totally up to you.
okay.
The whole contention that the Collins Center also instilled was that your bylaws and your charter do not challenge each other, that it's kind of an overlay, that
Yep.
you don't want to create a charter that then you find out is in conflict with your bylaws. So the next phase, if you will, or steps, are to do just that.
Yep.
Comprehensively make sure that the two of them are in sync.
You'll also find, so the charter, overall charter, is a smaller document than what it was coming in. So I think back in 1970, it was a little bit different, where the charter got into sometimes a lot of detail. And what has happened now is the charter, because to change a charter has to go all the way through the two houses and in front of the governor.
Yep.
It is not something that's taken lightly, and it is reviewed. So not only has this been 3 lawyers that have worked on it, it's also going to be reviewed at the State House by lawyers and all the way up through the governor. Bylaws can be done locally. So, as part of this process, right from the get-go and the education that we learned through the Collins Center, there were some things in the charter that really limited on what we could do as a town, but also became very, very challenging to change or circumvent, right? So as this document gets created, the idea is the charter is that 30,000-foot view to guide and oversee. The bylaws become what we govern by, and the bylaws can easily be changed year to year through the Board of Selectmen and a vote at town meeting. So again, it will allow the town to have more flexibility. We don't know what's coming down the road. Like what does Union Point ultimately become? I can tell you in the charter that we have today, it gives us some restrictions in it. This would give some flexibility on the Board of Selectmen on managing through some of those things. So.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I do. Maybe I'm missing it, but where does it talk about the DPW/highway?
So it doesn't. So what it does, so through the town administrator and Board of Selectmen duties, so it gives the authority and flexibility of the town administrator and Board of Selectmen to, if they feel that is the right way to go, to create departments. In the creation of those departments, so when we were going through here, and this is where the Collins Center became extremely helpful, right? So if you look through this charter, the only position that's called out is the town administrator in the combined treasurer collector. And that was done intentionally because we felt, after talking to the Collins Center, it wasn't, if we limited by naming positions, we would then limit the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator on how they want to guide the town, right? And not just today, but going into the future. So as a board, if you guys look at this and say, hey, we're better off by creating a Department of Public Works, and under that Department of Public Works, you guys look at what's the structure, what are the departments that we want under it. You guys have full authority and capabilities working with the town administrator to create that. If you wanted to create a finance department, if you wanted to create, I don't know, whatever master department, and then you have the flexibility to create that department how you want, not dictated by a committee that put this together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. We just felt that we wanted to leave as much flexibility for the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator. Listen, I was a member of the Board of Selectmen. Everyone held me accountable for every screw up in the town. At least if you're gonna hold me accountable for that, let me have say in it, right? Like, that was my thought through this whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna kill me for it, at least let me have.
It's crazy the stuff we get blamed for that we have no control over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize, but.
Which is fine.
You know, so.
I actually, John, that was my question as well, and my main comment is that this is so exciting, because this has been so needed, and I wanted to thank you and your committee, as well as in conjunction with the Collins Center. Your presentation was phenomenal, and it just addresses everything that, since I've been involved with, it's always been, well, you know, we just need to update the charter, and it's been with us, you know, and now since the 1970s, but the fact that, you know, with this organization will come the flexibility needed, and, you know, everything that I've heard tonight, well, you know, the town's going to be run in a more efficient, a more cohesive manner, there's going to be more synergy, it's all so exciting, and it's because of the time that you put into this, so I just want to say thank you. And then, in terms of the bylaw committee, is that going to be the same committee, or so it would be a new committee, but then do they report to your committee, or is it just completely new?
So this committee would actually disband.
Okay.
And then the new committee would be created. That's not saying that members of the current charter committee, you know, they may very well want to be part of
Oh, yeah,
the.
I thought I heard you say you all volunteered.
He's like, Rich, just one more thing and I'll let you go. It's like, just one more thing and I'll let you go.
Well, you showed up. That's why I have the microphone, which is great.
Well, we can't thank you enough. This was a lot of hard work.
So for me, I mean, there were a couple of things. I mean, obviously to go, 54 years without updating your charter is really appalling. I mean, the fact that you guys have it written in there that you should do this every 5 years is great, because I don't know, I wasn't here in 1970, I don't know what the purpose behind some of the items in the charter were, what the purpose behind it, but you could definitely tell that some items were listed or written with more purpose than others. And, who knows what the gripe was back then, the purpose. I love the fact, the way you guys approach this with a with you guys coming from all different, sides of it. And you guys looked at it very clearly, line by line. I've heard this from several people. Rich, you've told me several times how you guys have been so cohesive as a board and diligent with the fact that we're doing this before we move on to that. Don't get ahead of it yourselves, just line by line, and it can, I'm sure it takes a lot, and some of your meetings, I'm sure, were, 3-4 hours long at times, because this is exhilarating topic here,
It is. It is.
But,
Men can talk.
yeah, Judy, I was on the finance committee with them and the board of selectmen with them, all right? Facts, right? But with that being said.
Ask my wife, she says I never talk.
Yeah, probably, because you're exhausted and every place else. But with that being said, the approach that you guys took is great, and it's really realizing something that you and I think we started talking about 13, 14 years ago, about the town needing to run like a business.
Yeah.
Right.
Business is efficient, government is not. And if you set the town up to be a business, then we become efficient, and we're able to answer those questions. Who's in charge? Who's running the town? Because to your point, we're blamed for a lot of things up here, and that's okay. And usually if somebody asks me something, I'll try to get them an answer. But having the charter revamped in a manner that, we can turn and distinctly say, okay, yeah, this is how we're going to do this going forward. And Judy, to your point, we've been fortunate that we have professionals working in town hall, but that may not always be the case. And this is a charter that's written not for the people that are here today, but that it's written for tomorrow.
So can I, so.
Protect that.
So when we did this, it was very, there were a couple of things. One is, we wanted to create something that was for today, but in the future.
Mhm.
And that's why we left flexibility in there. The other thing that I think was really key on this, and it's hard. I've lived in Rockland my whole life, right? So people on the committee have been here a long time. So when you start talking about these boards and these positions, these are people that you know, right? But as a committee, we all agreed we had to take the person in that position out, and you look at the position. And I think that was really key. And to your point, you know, one of the things that we noticed in the charter, you could see where, there was a couple positions that some people were pissed at when that charter was created in 1970.
Yeah.
Right? And it was specific for some things.
Makes me curious what was going on.
Right? So there's so when we went through this, it was, we looked, the boards were all over the place. So we looked to make it consistent. Right? So everything that we did was trying to be consistent and take didn't matter if we knew them or not, take the person out of the role and just look at the role and kind of go from there.
And that's the point I was getting at, because when you do something like this, Judy is the, I'll use you as an example because you're here, she's the collector right now, but she's not going to be the collector 30 years from now. Maybe not, but I don't assume you're going to be here for 30 more years as the collector?
I did.
Okay, well, fair enough. So maybe my point is moot then, but Judy's not going to be here forever in this position, and you've seen it in other communities where, a high school senior runs for office and they win a popularity contest and they never show up to work.
Was that a highway superintendent at one time?
Yeah, and then there's another community where a teacher thought it was a good idea to double their salary, and they won an election and never showed up to work, and it took 6 months for the town to recall them, but they got half a year's salary out of it, so you have to protect the interests of the residents at that point as well, so.
Well, I think one of the important things, one of the challenges that I faced, which I thought I still think is rather ludicrous, is you can go to municipal collector treasurer school, but unless you work in the role, you cannot take the exam and get certified. So as many treasurer classes as I took, because I was not the acting treasurer, I was still kind of, the stopgap was you'll be maintained as the certified Massachusetts municipal collector only. Take as many treasurer classes as you'd like, but you will never be a CMMT.
Yeah.
With that speaks volumes to why this should be.
Government's not efficient.
It was, and as many times as I went to MCTA and I said, this is crazy, why, I just want to take the exam.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, well, you don't work in the roles, so, you'd have to be an existing treasurer in order to take the treasurer exam, which is, John would probably attest to that. We talked to that a ton. When he was taking the treasurer exam and I was taking the collector exam, and to me, it was such a complete analogy of what we were trying to do here. It's like, what?
And that's why it's important with the bylaws too, that
Yes.
the bylaws don't contradict
Yes.
the charter, because
Right.
we've gone through that a dozen times where we'll cite something in the charter and then somebody comes back with a bylaw and it's like, all right, now we need a legal opinion, which one trumps which, so that's
So when
an
this
important
passes
process.
at town meeting, the next step would be creating that bylaw review committee.
Yep.
So,
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate all the hard work you guys did over this time. And are we voting this for the warrant, or is that just in the warrant later?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can save it to your
Okay.
later vote.
Yep, perfect. Okay, so,
just one more thing. So we're going to be doing a Q&A session that is going to be on WRPS. And then we're also going to look at doing a couple of reach out in the month of April, looking to do one probably at during the day at the senior center and look to do at least one at night at the high school.
Very good.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for your hard work.
Thank
We're
you.
almost
Thank you.
there. You can see the finish line.
You don't get, nothing else to say. You have nothing else to say.
All right, next on the agenda, HR Director vacancy, delegation of hiring process to Town Administrator. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. So, as I believe I mentioned at a prior meeting, it is with deep regret that I again announced that our longstanding HR Director, Stacy Callahan, is going to be moving on to another opportunity. I'm thinking at our meeting, the first meeting in April, that'll be the last meeting that she'll still kind of physically be working for us. We can talk about her a little bit more then. Is she here now? There she is.
She's
I know,
hiding-
she loves the
hiding in the
spotlight.
back, yeah.
She loves the spotlight. But the purpose of tonight, what I put in your packet was the job posting that we have on the town website, as well as the job description, and the timing of this is kind of coincidentally appropriate given the charter discussion we just had, because it's just one of those examples where it's just a little bit ambiguous who has the authority to make that appointment. So especially where I'm hoping to be able to move quickly because Stacy's not going to be with us for too much longer, I'm asking for you to vote to delegate the hiring authority to me so that I can act quickly and hire the best person for the job. I'm happy to talk about that more if you'd like, but that's the purpose of this agenda item.
Any questions, comments?
Comment. That makes sense. I vote yes.
Is that a motion?
It is a motion, yes.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion from Lori to allow Doug to conduct
Correct.
the interviews and get her,
Yes.
okay. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you much.
Great, thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, other new business not reasonably anticipated. Doug?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I asked the Assistant Administrator, Courtney, and our Police Chief, Zioli, to come and give a little update on the emergency shelter at the Comfort Inn, because I know there's been a lot of questions that the board's been facing. So I'd asked Courtney and the Chief to come up if they could give a little bit of an overview on the status of the shelter. I know there's been questions about security and, call volumes, screening, all that kind of stuff. So I think they'll be able to provide you some good information.
Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming by. Obviously, Chief, without getting into too much details, because it is an active investigation, obviously there was an incident at the hotel last week that, at the emergency shelter, that we've received a lot of questions on. So I'll let you kind of start it off with a quick overview of what occurred, and then if the board has any questions after that, and then obviously Courtney, you as well.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. So we did, as you know, have an event at the hotel on March 13th. Our officers responded to the report of an assault that had occurred there. The report was that a male party had assaulted a female at the hotel. So our officers conducted an investigation of the incident. I happened to be in the area, so I was there as well. And as a result of that investigation, we placed a 26-year-old man under arrest, and he was transported to the Plymouth County House of Correction for holding, and then later transported to Hingham District Court, where he is currently being held, and the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office is handling that investigation. I just want to take a minute, if I could, and just commend, being there myself, I just want to commend the officers who were there that night. Those particular scenes are never easy. However, that one was compounded a little bit by some of the things that we faced, such as language barriers that we faced, getting translations and things like that. But as our officers do in any case, they overcame that. They were able to get the job done and place the party into custody. So that was a good outcome in that regard. I also want to just point out to the community that our department has initiated a number of community outreach programs in response not only to that incident, but just even when the whole program started back in October of '23. And we've established and maintained relationships with the National Guard through our emergency shelter programs, working closely with Courtney and Doug and the fire chiefs in the office in the audience today, as well as many other department heads. So we work on those meetings just to stay and get a pulse as to what's going on down there. Our department also initiates a number of what we call directed patrols, and what that is our department patrols that particular facility 3 times per shift, and our officers actually get out of the car, go in, meet the clerk, talk, see what's going on, and just really get a sense as to what's happening down there and be a resource for those at the hotel. We've also distributed community letters to the residents, really just an introduction of what our police department has to offer, whether it be 911 services, child seat installation, identity theft, really just giving them a sense as to what a police department here, where they can get help. And we did that in a number of different languages, including Haitian Creole. Lastly, I wanted to just talk to you briefly about some of the, what we're seeing down there as far as a PD is concerned. And what I did is I did a statistical analysis really of what we saw prior to the implementation of the program with the emergency shelter as opposed to what we're seeing now. And what we found that our call volume has gone up slightly, but I attributed that mainly to a lot of the medical calls that we're responding to there. As you know, the fire department takes the lead on the medical calls, but we do respond with them as a support. Our officers do carry a number of medical devices with them, whether it's a defibrillator, a Narcan, an ambu bag, things like that. So our officers do wish to help and can help in those particular events. So as far as our call volume has gone up a little bit, but really it's because of those medical calls. So that's what we're seeing up there now. Now, obviously, that doesn't diminish, I'm not diminishing what happened that night. That was a serious traumatic incident that happened. And, my heart goes out to the victim there. But what we're seeing is that, we're working closely with those who work there, and we're working closely with those in town. But that's currently where we're at right now, and if you have, happy to answer any questions. Or
Anybody have any questions for the chief? Okay, so Courtney, why don't you go, and if something comes up after?
Sure. Yeah. I'm just going to give a quick update on a few questions that have come into the town and from a few of you all about the screening process and just the site security itself. We continue to have weekly calls with the state regional coordinator, our local regional health organizations like South Shore Hospital and Manic Community Health, the Director of Municipal Relations for EOHLC, which is the agency that oversees the Emergency Assistance Shelter System. On those calls, we regularly ask questions of the team, and one of those questions that we've brought up kind of repeatedly is, what is the screening process for those who are placed in the emergency shelter system? So I just want to kind of update everyone on that. They do go, anyone who's placed does go through a background check and a SORI check. As of right now, there's no warrant check or query check, deep query check, but there's nothing really that the state can provide to us. There's no personal information that the state can provide to us because they're protected under the emergency shelter system. So I wanted to update the community on what that screening process does look like. There is a background check process and there is a SORI check, but I did confirm today that there is no warrant check and there's no query check. For the site security itself, we did get an update today from the state regional coordinators that they will be providing some private security on site at least through mid-April, and they'll be on site on off hours from the National Guard. So the National Guard is there every day from noon to 6. The private security will be there from 11 to 7. There's a little bit of gap in coverage that they're looking to kind of fill in, but they are working on some private security for the site. And the last thing that I'll just mention is that, given the overload of the system and the fact that, they are bringing security on site, they've also recently let us know that there's going to be a provider that they've contracted with that will be providing services to the Rockland site, as well as at least 6 or 7 other sites. So this is a larger service provider that's providing different wraparound services for those who are located at the emergency shelter site. Those might include I'm still getting all the details on exactly what those services are. Last week, the state was still kind of negotiating the contract with this service provider. But essentially, the provider will be on site. They'll be providing transportation. They'll be providing longer-term planning, and they'll be providing some case management for those who are at the shelter site itself in Rockland. They are anticipating that provider comes on mid-April, and so that's why the private security will be there probably through mid-April at least to start. Last thing I guess I can give is just a quick update on the census there. Right now there's, 150 people who are in the shelter system there at the Rockland site. It's about 50% adults, 50% kids. All of the placements through the emergency shelter system are families or they're pregnant individuals and their spouses. They all have to have some family tie and a child associated with their placement at the site. So I know that those have been a few of the questions that have come up. I'm happy to answer any other questions to the best that I can tonight.
Anybody have any questions, comments?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I get a lot of questions about what's going on with hotel tax for that
Yep.
particular site,
Yep.
so if you can.
Yeah, I actually have a quick update on that. I got back, for the foregone hotel tax revenues, Rockland will receive $31,000 for Q1 and Q2 last year. And then we
Each or
should,
combined?
say that again?
Each quarter or combined?
That's for the combined.
Okay.
And then something similar in Q3 and Q4. So we
Okay.
did get some feedback on that recently.
Okay.
I'm told we don't need to do anything, that DOR is just processing that automatically. So we'll continue to stay on top of that.
Okay, all right.
Can I just add one point to
Yeah,
what
sure,
Courtney
yeah.
said to back her up? And I want to particularly thank Senator Keenan's office, because
Yeah.
they helped get that funding passed in the budget, and they've helped follow through to not just get us the information, but to push that money through to us. So
Right.
we want to thank Senator Keenan for his efforts on that.
Excuse me, that's for this year and for,
It's for this past, from when the site first came online back in October.
Yep.
Through the current, basically, timeframe, and then it will continue, it'll be more automated moving forward, I'm told, by
Yeah.
by our state regional coordinator.
Yep, and my second question is, so the caseworkers that will be there in mid-April, supposedly, just explain what the caseworkers do. Are they going to help weave them out of the hotel and into a community of some sort with jobs, and so they can thrive? And
I think that is the intention behind bringing on a provider. Generally, the
Yeah.
provider would offer those wraparound services, those kind of typical case management services where you would have longer-term planning for the residents that are in the shelter system, because technically this is an emergency shelter system. It's not meant to be permanent, it's meant to be temporary. And so ultimately, the goal is for these families to be placed in permanent housing at some point. So that's why the provider is coming on site, to kind of help
Yep.
with those processes and to help provide those services for this particular constituency.
Great, thank you.
John?
Anybody else?
Yeah, the 31,000, what does that compare to what we used to get? If you don't know the number off the cuff,
Yeah, I have
just
to
let me know. I'm just
Yeah.
curious to know if that's where that 31,000 kind of came from. They just kind of threw a number at it, or if they based it somewhat on what we were actually losing.
Yeah, I don't have the backup for that. We'll have to ask.
Yeah.
Generally, I know it was a question we had, because the way the funds get transmitted from the state, it's just an aggregate, every quarter. We don't know how much is even coming from which hotels or Airbnbs or anything else. It was hard for us to estimate what the loss was, but what I'm hoping is that they calculated after the 90 days or whatever the period of time was that they stopped paying, that they just then said, okay, paying the room tax for those days, it totals a number. That's what I'm hoping, but we didn't get the
Is it
backup.
something compared to what I
Yes.
we were going to totally stiff us, so that's.
I can
Exactly.
ask and get more information on that.
And then of the roughly 75 children there, how many of them are school age? And then are other towns taking some of those kids into their schools?
Not sure about other towns taking kids into their districts. One thing that I will mention is that we have been raising that alarm bell for a while about school-aged children. We have not had a new placement at the site since early February. And before that, we didn't have any school-aged children, except for maybe a few at the beginning of January, which we raised immediately, and they kind of stopped. We've asked them to please notify us if they do intend to send school-aged children, so that we can coordinate with either with Rockland Public Schools, but also with our neighboring communities who have offered some of this assistance. So I think that answers your question, but
So most of them are like toddlers?
most of them
babies,
are
et cetera.
infants. Yeah, so I actually have, there's 26 infants, 46 kids. So kids are, probably I don't think 46 kids are school-aged kids. So I can get the total breakdown for you. I'm hesitant to share too much age-specific information just because
more curious because I had heard that other towns were offering to help, but I don't know
Yeah.
if that was just a rumor or if there was some truth behind that, so.
I don't think we've made a specific ask to any community yet about
Well, I think somebody updated at one point that there were 11 kids being bused into other
Yes.
communities because that's where they were sent from.
Yeah, no, and I think what can happen is, this can then become like the host home community, and so if they go to another town, then
Transportation
there's
costs.
greater costs for us to transport students out of district, and that can even be more costly, so it's tough.
Tiffany, you okay?
I guess my main questions have been answered, but would we be able to request, if we don't need the schooling, but towns have willingly, or at least indicated that they may help with school, would they be able to help with transportation resources? Or are there other ways that we could ask for support if, for the time being, school wasn't an issue? Just curious if there would be any way that we could break down some of the demand that's been placed on the town and obtain other support mechanisms.
The only thing I could probably speak to about that is that recently the state notified us that they're renegotiating their transportation contract. I know the transportation's been a huge issue at the
Right.
shelter site, and they're trying to renegotiate what that structure looks like so that there's more flexibility and more flexible options for transportation for those who are at the shelter site by using things like Uber and Lyft and things. That's not currently part of their plan. So I think that that's probably the only thing that I could probably mention that would speak to that. I can,
It's
if
just
there's something,
just a question.
yeah, I'm happy to look into some specifics, but
Okay, thank you.
yeah, sure.
So I'll just circle back to kind of where we started off. I mean, obviously, I asked you guys both to come in because we had a serious incident down there.
Yeah.
I was concerned for the health and safety of not only the people in the shelter, but, the people in the community. I had a lot of questions in regards to the screening process. I had a lot of questions in regards to not just with you guys, but with Senator Keenan. He followed up similar response about the warrant checks and the query checks and a lot of the issues that they were running into because these people were coming from, third world countries that they don't necessarily have that information available. So that's, obviously something that is going to have to be continued to be monitored. I have, complete confidence in the Rockland Police Department and the job that you guys are doing. I think it's great that you guys are doing directed patrols as a resource, making yourselves be known down there and maintaining a presence throughout the course of the night. And I think that at this point right now, we have to look at what occurred last week as something isolated and terrible, absolutely awful, but isolated in this sense. And and just take steps, if there are steps needed to be taken to make sure that we continue to protect, not only the community at large, but the people in the emergency shelter as well. So I appreciate you guys coming out in kind of the last minute. Chief, I totally flaked on asking you to come by till this afternoon, so I appreciate it.
Always available.
Well, you usually show up anyway, but I didn't make the formal request. But I think, as we go on, we should, because it has been a lot of information that's gotten out there, that's been put out there, and then a lot of misinformation that's been put out there. So it's not about controlling a narrative, it's about correcting the narrative, right? So, I've known Nick for a long time, and Courtney, I've known you for a little while, but, I think, I trust the fact that everything you guys are doing is the utmost transparency, and you guys are supplying the accurate information to the residents of the community. And the more we can do this, I think, as we see things come up, or maybe before they come up. So, I know Doug mentions it at the end of each meeting, maybe, you know, once a month, we have you guys come in and just kind of give us an update. Chief Duffy, you might be included in that as well at some point too, because to your point, Chief Zioli, they have definitely made some points that the police are there all the time, but, you know, correcting the fact that you guys are intentionally there, you know, to check in. You know, there is such thing as preventative maintenance, you know, and that's what you guys are doing. So with that, Doug, if you have anything, we can move on from here.
No, I don't really have anything. I think they covered it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, next on the agenda, old business, annual and special town meeting warrants. Wow, that cleared up room, huh? John Clifford walks in, everybody walks out. Always. Every time you walk in, the room empties.
All right, thank you. So I thought I'd quickly go through the warrant, and I want to highlight that the draft that you have in your packet, John Clifford, Town Council, has not seen this yet. This is just kind of hot off the press for me. It's a very rough draft, so my plan is, after getting some final direction from you tonight on some budgets and article issues, I plan on trying to finalize my draft tomorrow. Then I'll ship it off to John Clifford for him to review and help me finalize. So again, you know, there will be typos in here. It was a rough draft. So to start with the special town meeting, currently I have 6 articles on there. I think we'll probably need to add an additional one. So what we currently have in there, in the order that I have it listed, is paying unpaid bills from a prior year. That's Article 1. Article 2 is a snow and ice deficit. Article 3 is an unusual one. As you recall, at our last special town meeting in November, we voted a number of articles to be funded from free cash. And so even though we submitted supplemental information later to the DOR, they just recently told us that since we voted those in November, after June 30, when the fiscal year closed, and before our next free cash number was certified, we were in this kind of limbo state that we really shouldn't have voted that way at that time. So they're just simply asking us to revote and confirm it. So that Article 3, which you'll see listed on the next page, on page 5, I have them all included in one article listed in the table. So that's just revoting what we already did. Article 4 is something that we should take a minute to talk about. So this is, as you recall, we had an initial vote for funding to replace a roof and an HVAC unit and all the related controls at the police station. Then we got updated price quotes from contractors, and we added $100,000 to that. Well, since that time, we've hired engineers to actually draw up the specifications and come up with the plans and do more formal bidding estimates, and it's likely that it could be in excess of even those additional funds. The cost estimates that these engineers put together are always very conservative, so I'm hoping it's going to be less than that. So what I'm proposing is, in talking with the Finance Committee, I'm trying to get this out to bid as soon as possible so that by the day before town meeting on May 5th, we'll have an actual low bid price in hand, so we won't be estimating anymore. We'll know the actual number. If it's $200,000 or less over budget, I think we'll be able to accommodate that internally with a reserve fund transfer and the remainder of my town capital projects appropriation. If the low bid price is in excess of that amount, that's why I have this article here as kind of a backup for that project. So hopefully by the time town meeting comes, we got the low bid, and we can just pass over this article and we won't need it. But it's there just in case, because the roof and the HVAC need to get done, and we have to follow the public construction law. Article 5 is additional unexpected SPED tuition and transportation expenses for the current year, FY24, for the school department. Article 6 is an appropriation from free cash for student transportation van purchases. And then Article 7, which I'll need to add, will be sick time buyouts for some anticipated retirements that we'll be having. So that's what I've listed for the special. If we turn a few pages and we go down to the annual town meeting list, I'll go kind of quickly for some of the more standard ones: annual elections, elected official compensation, the general fund operating budget. That Article 4, the retirement buyouts, that's what I just alluded to, that we'll move that to the special. Article 5, 6, and 7 is the transfers to OPEB and the 2 stabilization funds. Article 8, this was sort of an interesting thing when the Parks Commissioners met with the Finance Committee. There was a lot of discussion about the fees that the Parks Commissioners do or don't charge for the use of different fields and facilities, and so the suggestion was made, which I think was a good one, was to create a revolving fund so they can start charging fees and putting that money through the revolving fund for field maintenance and capital improvements. Spending limits for revolving funds, the water budget, sewer budget, community preservation allocations, and then the Community Preservation Act projects that they're recommending is a feasibility study to replace the track at Reed Street, a Veterans Tree Memorial, and the GAR Hall, restoring and digitizing some historic documents. And then lastly, and everyone's favorite, is the Phase 3 of the restoration of the Tramp House. I've got some interesting feedback on that one from the Finance Committee, but that is recommended, and that's at the Little League Fields down on Beach Street. Then there are a number of water and sewer capital requests. My plan this year, instead of listing out each one as an individual article, I want to create a table so that each project will be listed separately but have it in one article with one bottom line. That'll be helpful for the water and sewer departments to be able to move money around a little bit if one project's a little more and one's a little less, and it cuts down on the number of votes. Article 19, this is an important one. This is an additional authorization for the sewer department to borrow funds for improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. And I'll get to it when we get into the budget later, but if you later go into the next tab, tab F, at the end of the general fund budget, you'll see a couple of debt schedules that our financial advisor put together for us. One, and these are for $12.5 million borrowing for the sewer department. And they put together 2 different options. One's at sort of a regular general obligation bond, which they estimate 4% is a reasonable rate. And then they also gave us a run with going through the Clean Water Trust, known as the State Revolving Fund. That's a much lower interest rate, 2.4%, but it's even really lower than that because there's also options for interest forgiveness, 0% interest, and even potential for possible principal loan forgiveness. So the sewer department understands that. We went through all these numbers, and what's important to note is if you look at, say, for example, the first sheet, the general obligation bond schedule for the $12.5 million, you'll see in the first year there's a $250,000 cost, and then it goes up to over $700,000 thereafter. And just for reference, I'm showing this. This is the document I'm looking at, that one there. So the reason I bring that up is because as we're looking at the sewer budgets, we're making sure their enterprise fund has an appropriate rate increase to be able to fund the debt service on this debt, because it's all got to be funded through the sewer department enterprise fund, and make sure that budget is in balance. So we're working closely with the commissioners on that. Obviously there's no ballot question at the annual town election for a debt exclusion for this. So this will be written the same way the last round of borrowing was for the sewer department, which is a general obligation bond. The town is ultimately on the hook for paying the debt service, but it'll be worded in the article again, the debt service needs to be paid from the sewer enterprise fund, because this is an enterprise fund and it's a sewer expense. But we're sort of the backstop from that in case they fail to do that, but I'm sure that'll never be the case. But that's a significant amount. If you cross-reference this to the capital plan that Rich Harris spoke about earlier, you'll see this on the capital plan, $12.5 million, followed by $10 million in FY26 and another $10 million in FY27. So it's really a $32.5 million phase that they're looking at. At the last meeting that I was in at the sewer commissioners with the town accountant, they were talking about reprioritizing what needed to be done sooner based on some critical systems at the treatment plant that they're concerned about. So I think, if I'm remembering correctly, instead of focusing on the phosphorus treatment, they're going to be looking at aerators and clarifiers and other equipment that needs to be designed and constructed. Then there's another article for sewer, just moving some money around. They're also looking for Article 21, authorization to enter into a 5-year contract for the operator. As a reminder, there's only 2 employees, currently town employees, working at the sewer department. The rest of the operation is outsourced to a private company. That contract will be expiring relatively soon, so they're looking for the opportunity to enter into a 5-year contract, so we need a town meeting vote for that. School department is also looking for authorization to enter into some leases for greater than 3 years. That's Article 22. Articles 23 and 24 are going to be all the different capital articles. It'll end up being more than those 2 articles, but that's just a placeholder for now because we have to make the final decisions at the next agenda item tonight. But I do plan, similar to what I was saying with water and sewer, by combining things within a department in one article. I want to do that for some of the other larger departments. So for example, highway, fire department, if they have a number of capital articles, we'll list them in a table, all in one article. If anybody ever has a question at town meeting, I'm going to make this up, and for some reason, someone at town meeting wants to fund the turnout gear for fire, but they don't want to buy the cardiac monitors in the ambulances, just to make up a crazy example. Hopefully that would never happen. People can always get up at town meeting floor and say, I move to amend this article by striking that one out or changing, so people still have the ability to make a change, but given what we're doing, it's much more efficient to try to consolidate. So that's my plan there. The Board of Assessors, in working with a number of our other departments, including our COA director, is looking to increase the amount that we can pay our senior tax work-off people, volunteers. So we have to wait for the Board of Assessors to formally vote that, but I anticipate that they're going to make that recommendation. Then there's a number of articles for the MBTA community zoning, which we've talked about before. I can't stress enough how critical it is that we vote and pass these articles. Just read the newspaper and look at what's happening in Milton. They're immediately losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're being sued by the Attorney General. They're going to lose a lot more money and incur a lot of legal expenses. So we don't want that to happen here. We have to pass zoning that conforms to this new law. It's a very complicated law and formula. It's not just a simple thing. You need to have access to this computer system that can calculate density and square footage and acreage and all these things to make sure it complies. We've done that. Our new planner, Allison Quinn, is working with Courtney. They're going to be doing some community outreach meetings at various places in town to make sure the community's familiar with this and can answer any questions they might have before town meeting. And then the next zoning article is the FEMA floodplain map updates. Again, FEMA, changed the maps, so we're going to do an update. I should highlight all these zoning bylaws have gone through the planning board, and they've had their public hearing, no problems. I included their recommendation in your packet. I didn't know, Mike, did you have a question about the floodplain?
No, I just, we went through it a few years ago with the floodplain map bylaw, so let's just make sure that, we're 100% on it this time around, you know what I mean? I just don't want to sleep on that one, just in case.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we've all learned a lesson from that experience before, so I don't anticipate any issues. And then the last article is the town charter update, which Rich Penny and Judy Hardigan just spoke about. Any questions just on that list? I know I went kind of quick, but does that make sense? Yes, Lori?
Yeah, it's not only a list. Clearly I've had questions all along about sewer and their decisions and to spend, and by them switching around their priorities and putting some things ahead of the phosphorus balancing, we need that upgrade for the EPA mandate, is that, if I remember correctly?
Yeah,
Right?
my understanding is they're treating it with chemicals now, so I
Yeah.
think the chemical treatment we're abiding by the letter of the law. It's not a good permanent solution, but I think
Right.
temporarily it's keeping us in compliance with that.
So I think those chemicals are what's wrecking the equipment in the first place, from what I
Yeah, that I don't
remember.
know.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe, have you talked to them about this?
Not
one?
specifically about that.
Oh, okay, because, well, there's that, and then there's the fact that, I was talking to some select board members in Situate, and their population is only like 2,000 people less than ours is, and they're pricing out brand-new sewer plants at 35 to 50 million, and, the sewer commissioners I mean, it keeps going up. When I first got on this board, it was around 50 million they wanted, which, seemed in line with everything else. And then it went up to 80 million, and now it's, I think, at 100 million that they're asking for, and I'm just scratching my head at that. And can you find out some answers on that? That'd be great. And that's just for the plant. It has nothing to do with I&I, and, we can have a brand spanking new plant, but if we don't have the capacity to put through it, are we putting the cart before the horse? So, with their decisions on what they need for money in this warrant, I would like those questions answered first. So, and I talked to somebody in Brockton who got a brand-new sewer plant a couple years ago, and they have 10 times the population of Rockland, and they paid $90 million for their new sewer. So, these are my questions.
Okay.
That's it.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Doug.
All right, so, and my plan, again, like I said, is I'm going to try to update this draft tomorrow. I'll send it to John Clifford, and then at your next meeting on April 2nd is when I'm hoping to have the 100% final legally approved. John's not here, so I can say yes, he'll have that done by then. April 2nd is my hope to have that done. So that's all I have on the warrant.
Okay, next on the agenda, FY25 budget, Doug.
Great, thanks. So on the operating budget, there's really no changes from your last meeting. On the first page is the revenue and expense sheet, and you can see that we are in balance. You see the 70-30 split on the back side of that. Again, we're sticking with the additional shift of revenues to the school department, given this difficult state aid year that we're facing. I wasn't really planning on going through any individual departments because it's really more on the free cash and articles that I wanted to spend more time, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have on the operating budget. Looks good?
Okay,
I think
All right.
so.
Great. So if we fast forward, then, again, we have these debt schedules from sewer, which we already spoke about. If you go after those debt schedules, you see this document that looks like this. It has a watermark that says draft. So that, I should have mentioned earlier, that was an interesting document that one of the engineering consultants for the sewer department put out that kind of compared side by side. The town funded means a general obligation, regular bond, and the SRF loan is going through the Clean Water Trust, the state revolving fund, and looking to see how badly that might delay the process going through the SRF, because it adds a lot more bureaucracy and work and approvals. But when you look through the schedule, you can see it only really slows things down by like a month in the end. It's really not too bad. So I know they're really going to make every effort to pursue the SRF, which I fully support.
Which they should. Yeah.
Yep. So then if we can spend a few minutes, I'd like to go through all the capital articles. So the next document you should have is that horizontal spreadsheet that says FY25 capital and other free cash. And I would like to quickly just go through this entire list. It shouldn't take too long, but there's just a couple of things I want to highlight. So, again, snow and ice deficit, $260,000.
It's the last page.
I'm sorry.
We had quite a few of other.
Is it a different article?
We had a lot of different things in between there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Looks like that.
It's just the very last page, guys.
Sorry about that. Yep. Snow and ice, and then the, retirement buyouts, town capital projects, that's all pretty standard. Now, the next one's a little different. So we have that $2 million request for the ladder truck, and Chief, I think, just stepped out, but,
So that's one of the pages that came before this, is the ladder truck.
so tell me what piece of paper you're looking at? Sorry. Oh, the financing,
Yes.
okay, so that's, okay, I'm sorry, I'll explain that now, yep, my apologies.
No
Yep.
worries.
So, with the fire truck, as we talked about before, we did look at some different lease purchase financing options, things like that, so that's what you see in there. There's, we got specific quotes, and you can see, the payments are, $250,000 a year, and up, depending on the term. We also got some quotes in there for some of the highway vehicles too. So, I talked about this with the finance committee, they weren't as keen on like the whole lease purchase option, I think, for a couple reasons. One is there's interest, so we're paying more, and, kind of binding our future free cash certifications and kind of tying them up, and which I think were very similar concerns that you had. And so what I'm recommending here is, you'll see when we get farther down, just funding funding everything with existing cash. We won't have $2 million available after all this to pay for the ladder truck out of cash, but we have over $300,000 in our capital stabilization fund. So my thought is, let's add $150,000 to the capital stabilization fund and basically just treat this with its intended purpose, which is kind of like a savings account for capital projects. And let's see over the next year or two or three if we can really pump some money in there and either outright purchase it or have a way more significant down payment, so a future lease would be more nominal, something like that. So if we can maybe just park that in the back of your head for a minute, and let's keep going through. And I just want to highlight that is a significant issue. But again, what's tricky about the ladder truck is they don't need it today, or they don't even need it next year, but it takes so many years to construct and get delivered that we have to be proactive. So I think we'll be okay with this approach, but think about it for a minute as we keep going through. The next one, derelict properties. This is funding that would go in the building department for when we have a building that's abandoned and there's blight and needs to be boarded up and cleaned up. Ultimately, in talking to the town accountant, we both agree this is something that should probably go into an operating budget for the building department. But given the tight year this year, I'm not looking at doing that, but I think in the future, we could wrap that in, because that's something that kind of really never completely goes away. You fix one and another one pops up. The cemetery software and equipment, we're recommending to fund out of the cemetery revolving fund. The ADA access at the front door of the COA, that's why that number is less than the request. There was another phase of that request for some ADA parking in the front, which we're going to pursue some grants that could help cover that part.
Okay.
Active shooter training for police and fire at $152,000. The fire department incident command system training, we're not recommending that at this time because Chief Duffy's going to apply for a grant. The $150,000 for the fire station studies, that's one of those articles I mentioned earlier that we have to revote. Same thing with the fire department grant match. Cardiac monitors for the fire department and their ambulances, recommending that be partially funded from our marijuana host community agreement funds. We just talked about the ladder truck. Radios for the new engine, $60,000 should be funded from the marijuana funds. Firefighting turnout gear out of marijuana funds. From the Board of Health, the recycling center building repairs at $90,000. And then highway and health, finally getting this screening of the compost pile done. Unfortunately, the cost looks to be $160,000, which is a lot because there's huge equipment that's rented, there's a lot of labor involved, a lot of time involved. I think when we do this, we should have some kind of public outreach that we do, maybe even tape it and talk about it, because it's so unfortunate, because this is from years and probably decades of illegal dumping in the leaf pile, and now it's come home to roost, and it's not safe, and it's got to get cleaned, and it's costing taxpayers a lot more money, and it's all preventable. So I think in the future, the Board of Health has instituted better control material that has to be cleaned out. One item that we're not recommending funding at this point are the rail trail crossing upgrades that Dave Taylor was looking for. In talking with Courtney, we think there might be some grants available that we can apply for that, so we're going to pursue those first. And then at the Highway and Police Department, repaving the parking lot, some curbing and walkway improvements on Belmont Pacific Reed Street, a new excavator, a new 10-wheeler dump truck, various roadway resurfacing, part of which could be funded from marijuana host community agreement funds, since the road is going right by the dispensaries, and the engineering associated with the VFW Drive Mass DOT Transportation Improvement Project grant that we're in the queue for. We have to spend money to keep the design moving in order to be eligible for the big grant. So again, in this instance, given this road and its proximity to the marijuana dispensaries, recommending funding that in full, $135,000 from the dispensary host community agreement payments. And again, if we're successful in getting this tip approved, That could be a $13-14 million grant that we could receive. Chief Duffy, I just want to let you know, we were talking a minute ago about the ladder truck, and my recommendation for now is to contribute $150,000 into our capital stabilization fund, which will bring that fund up close to $500,000, and basically treat that as like a savings account for the ladder truck. And over the next year or two, keep pumping more money in there, and then we can either get a lease purchase a lot lower or just buy it outright. In the personnel HR department, we're going to modernize and get out of the old paper world with onboarding and all the related, recruiting, benefits, et cetera, and modernize it to what the private sector is doing, as you would say, and have it done electronically. It'll be way more efficient for everyone. Library, we have to replace a number of sprinkler heads. That's going to be funded from a prior capital article for something unrelated, but that project is now fully complete, so we can just reappropriate the funds for this purpose. Also at the library, it is an important project, cleaning out and kind of reconstructing some of the sewer lines under the building. I want to stress it's not the sewer lines in the street. The way it was originally constructed under the cement on the basement floor, it's not working any longer, so that needs to be fixed. The granite stairs, that's completely rebuilding those granite stairs on Union Street. That's been a long-standing request. In talking to the library director, we're not recommending funding that now. They don't have any plans in the near future to open up that Union Street entrance yet. I think hopefully at some point they will, and then I think we could look at doing this. We just spent a bunch of money with Dave Taylor's help pulling those stairs out, fixing some of the leaks that have been seeping through that foundation into the basement, and then pouring concrete and kind of resetting them. So I don't want to kind of throw away that investment we just made, because that was really made to prevent water infiltration. But again, at some point in the future, when they get to the point where they want to open that doorway, we can look at rebuilding those stairs to make them a little bit more code compliant. Little League baseball fencing at the Parks Department. This is one of those where I talked about kind of helped form the genesis of the revolving fund that we created. There was a lot of discussion at the Finance Committee about whether taxpayers should be paying for this or whether the users of that sport should be funding a greater contribution level for that type of thing. There was concern that, at least on one of the fields, they were worried about safety because the fences were so old, so we're recommending funding half of that here, and we could either phase half of it this year, half the next year, or maybe they can do the other half. Parks Department, a new truck. Planning Department, update our housing production plan, and again, that's critically important, the housing production plan, because that's what helps us ultimately get to safe harbor and be able to have some control over 40Bs. Police station roof, we talked about that, revoting the old articles, and then the way I have it shown here in this spreadsheet is I show the additional $200,000 that I want to have an article for. Again, my hope and my belief is that I don't think we're going to actually need that article. I think between the reserve fund and town capital projects, we'll be able to offset that expense, so that's why I have the offset shown right underneath it. But of course, in reality, if the actual low bid comes in so much higher that we need it, then we'll have that article to vote. In the police, also a new animal control vehicle, new tasers, 2 new police cruisers funded from marijuana funds. Community center repairs, this is from the Recreation Department, the $155,000. So this is for a number of different items. I didn't bring the list with me, but a number of items, both I think inside and relating to the envelope of the building, that really do need to be made. I think it's important to highlight again that in addition to the $130,000 we have in our operating budget to maintain McKinley, this extra $155,000 is just a drop in the bucket for what's needed, and if we don't make some bigger decisions, we're going to keep having these types of requests. They did have a request in to repave the parking lot. That's something that we can look at next year if we end up staying in that building, but something's got to give, so that's not recommended at this time. Funding for the potential rec center lease space improvements. So this is significant. So what I'm trying to, we've talked about this before. I gave you, my long email that kind of gave you my approach to how we're handling this RFP for space. As a reminder, the proposals are due this Friday. And again, for the public, it's a request for proposals to solicit input from private landowners, private building owners, to see if they have a space that would be suitable to rent to the town to relocate our rec center. We think there might be a location that possibly could work, but by the time we get the proposals in Friday, review them, do all that due diligence, the warrant's going to be closed, the budget's done, there's no time to accurately include that. So what I've put in here as a guess is I put in $500,000 for improvements to any space, because I don't think there's going to be any space that's going to be already built out with a gymnasium and program space and a kitchenette for a rec center. I just don't think that exists in town. So I think if we're lucky, we'll find a space that can be built out, but we're going to have to pay for those expenses. Now, the details, I have no idea, because we haven't got the proposals yet. I don't know if we'll need to pay in a lump sum up front and use this, or whether it would be a smaller amount that we'd finance over 10 years and we won't need all this. So this is just something to have just in case. And if none of the proposals come back suitable, we pass over this article and it just remains as a balance in free cash. Does that make sense before I go on any further?
Yes.
All right. Portable stage for community center events, that's small dollars, only $11,000, but it's actually going to pay for itself, so they don't have to rent it every time. Then there's a number of different articles. We're funding everything that the school department has requested. We have to revote $300,000 for sped tuition and transportation. They've asked for an additional $400,000 in sped tuition and transportation, and another $300,000 in FY25 for sped foster and homeless costs. So there's $1 million right there, right out of the gate, and it's very difficult. These costs are not controllable by the school department. It's very difficult. New Chromebooks, security camera replacements, and then a large request, which I'm recommending we fund $500,000 to do significant repairs to the Eston School, HVAC and electrical improvements. It does not include the roof. The roof they're looking at through another process, I think potentially through an MSBA grant-related program. Vestibule security at the middle school for nearly $300,000. $100,000 for purchasing or leasing student transportation vans, and $50,000 for buying some sped vans in the current year. That was on the special town meeting list. And then lastly, under the treasurer is time and attendance software. So this is it's the same company, it's just sort of a different module from the HR software I spoke about earlier for onboarding and benefits and all that. So the current system we have, we use Harper's for payroll. It does not accurately calculate time and attendance and can't really work right, and the best solution is a whole different system that would allow employees to have accounts that they can go on online, see real time what their actual numbers are, and we won't have this constant reconciliation between accounting and treasurers and all that. So that'll be money well spent. So you can see our certified free cash number is $6.6 million, which is a good number. $500,000 of that or more are related to those articles we voted in November that we have to revote. So really think of our certified free cash number as closer to $6 million. And with all these recommendations that I have, and again, the highlights being not fully funding the fire ladder truck, putting money into a capital stabilization account, putting in $500,000 for potential rec center lease improvements, and having an article for the police station roof, but again, for this purpose, I'm assuming we won't need it. So with all those assumptions, we're still leaving a little over $500,000 unspent, which I think is important, because you really don't want to spend every penny. You want to be conservative. So this, I think, out of everything tonight, I wanted to kind of get any final input you have, priorities, direction, before we kind of lock this down and I finish writing the warrant. Just want to, I feel like we're accomplishing, 98% of everything, which is pretty good in difficult times. So I'm happy to take any questions on that if you have any.
Anybody have any questions?
Just quickly, on the sped for 24, wouldn't that need to be a special vote?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe I have that listed in the special
Yeah,
in the
just
warrant.
making sure.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, anybody else?
Just one, and we can even get this next time, but given that you're still using the marijuana, funds, just curious, how would that affect us, next year? Like,
Yeah,
in the
so-
years that we don't
Yep,
have that.
that's a great
About
question.
How much has been allocated from that? And I'm just curious so that moving ahead, we know
Yep.
what
So
we're gonna need.
there was a method to my madness here, so if you look on that last page of these capital articles, you'll see the marijuana HCA column totals 579,307. We have 580,000 available in the bank, so this is spending it down, and it's very possible this could be it, you know.
Right.
It wouldn't surprise me if we don't get another penny, even from those whose licenses have not yet expired with the Cannabis Control Commission. I've had a lot of conversations with our Land Use Council about how aggressive we should be in trying to push those. I'm taking Land Use Council's advice, and I'm not kicking that hornet's nest because there's been some litigation in other communities and settlements with refunding money and things like that, and we don't want to go down that road. So the short answer is this is spending everything we have. It's likely we're not going to get any more. It's possible from some one or more dispensaries, it's possible they could do the right thing and just kind of voluntarily agree to give us some donations. For example, because it's something we've done every year, 2 police cruisers. Maybe we can get a dispensary, not part of the HCA's because that's not allowed by law, but just they want to make a donation. That's something I'm going to continue to try to work toward. But yeah, I mean, this is another example of how that law killed us because here's over $500,000 we're saving taxpayers by using those funds for these purposes, and that's going away, and it's going to go right into the marijuana dispensary profits. That was the priority of the legislature.
Sorry, I'm trying to stay calm.
Yeah, I hear you. I'll stop.
My blood boils every
I'll
time
stop,
we talk
I
about
know.
the marijuana thing.
Yep, I know.
I
Me
just
too.
keep smiling up here. I know you're catching me, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to get mad. I'm done.
Yep. So everybody good with those recommendations?
Thank
All
you.
right, great.
Yeah.
I see John is back in the office. John Clifford, I just wanted to let you know when you're out of the room, I committed you to helping me get the warrant finalized in time for their next meeting on April 2nd. I'll have a draft for you in a day or two. Sound good? You're on camera, so it's going to make it hard for you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I have on the budget.
Thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda, old business, not reasonably anticipated.
I have none.
Okay, town administrator's report and correspondence. Doug.
Thanks. Just a couple of quick things. One is on the MWRA water expansion study that I've spoken about previously. The RFQ request for qualifications was complete. The team that was reviewing folks made their final decision. They awarded the contract. It's fully executed, so we are off and running. Each town is going to be using their ARPA funding to pay for their share of the contract. We've already submitted our ARPA application to the county, and we've already made it up to their, what they call Level 3 review, which is the final review. And related to that, I attended a meeting yesterday in Weymouth with all the other participating towns, in addition to Weymouth being there, Abington, Norwell, Hingham, Situate, Cohasset, Hanover. And the purpose of that was really to meet with, Mayor Headland was there as chief of staff, as all of his infrastructure leadership. And it was really interesting because they're ahead of us as far as applying to the MWRA, and obviously we're going to need to go through Weymouth. I think, so it's a very collaborative, process that we're engaging in. What I found interesting that I didn't really know as much about is what they've uncovered as they've been going through this process is that in addition to the benefits of having increased water supply, the water's clean, it's not going to be contaminated, there's big environmental benefits that they talked about broadly throughout the community, protecting different watersheds and all kinds of things, and that we'll learn more about, but it was a whole angle of this that I hadn't really been thinking about. I've just been thinking about it more as far as supply, and the quality of the water, but I hadn't been thinking about the ancillary environmental benefits. So there'll be more to come on that. Maybe I'll go out of order just because I was talking about the ARPA application. We also had 2 other ARPA applications approved. One was for the sewer digester boiler repairs, the second phase of that. That was nearly $320,000. And the $79,000 for the water PFAS filter vessels that we spoke about before. Those have all just been approved. And unfortunately, the county is insisting on coming back for another photo op with a big check. So they'll be here on April 16th, assuming I did my best to ask them to please stop.
It's an election cycle, I get it.
That's, yeah. So April 16th.
Multiple up for
Yep,
re-election, so.
and there'll be some photos, so you want to dress up for that one. Next, our special act request that we had into the state legislature to designate the selectmen as cemetery commissioners has been signed into law, so congratulations, you are all now cemetery commissioners. Our next step on that, we're going to work on developing some rules and regulations that you can adopt. I'll work with Attorney Galvin on drafting that for your review. And then lastly, we've had some staffing changes here in Town Hall. I thought I'd mention what we have available. We have a full-time senior clerk position in the collector's office that's vacant. We have a full-time senior clerk in the assessor's office that's vacant, and a part-time senior clerk in the sewer department. That's a relatively new position. It used to just be one admin, one clerical person. But if that person's sick or on vacation or wherever, then there's like no coverage, so it makes sense to have some part-time help. And then lastly, the Recreation Department is currently looking for 3 lifeguards. If anyone is interested or knows anyone, please apply. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Selectmen's comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen, and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Selectperson Elwood?
Sure. This Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, the Rockland High Drama Club is putting on their annual spring musical. It's going to be Mamma Mia. I'm always amazed at the level of talent that the drama club comes up with. It's a great time. It's $10 for kids and seniors, I think $15 for adults. It is most definitely worth the money. So this, like I say, this coming Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Mamma Mia. Get a little ABBA in your head. That's not a bad thing, I think, so. That's it.
Thank you, John. Selectperson Childs?
ABBA rocks. Also, I wanted to apologize to my board and Doug, because in a previous meeting, I made comments about wanting to see a DEI department in Rockland, and a resident was here and was very surprised. They were like, we don't have one, and we don't, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a perhaps want of one from other people on the board, and Doug, I've talked to them before about it. I just wanted to clarify that we are very sensitive to a diversity, equity, and inclusion department or committee at first, or call it diversity, equity, and belonging. Some other towns are calling it that, but it's been an initiative nationally with corporations for many years now, and there's a lot of benefits to it financially for the town, so, and we can get into that later, but I just wanted to apologize that it came across that everybody here except for me was really passionate about this. So there are other people on the board who have even, tried to approach people of color in town to participate in the process. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Warwick.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair Needham?
I'd like to congratulate all the organizers of the Blarney Brunch. It was a wonderful success and a lot of fun. I'm also getting my tickets for this weekend's Mamma Mia, which will be a lot of fun as well. And that's about it this week.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. I really don't have anything. There's not a lot going on. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, Rockland professional firefighters, and per Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, to discuss the discipline or dismissal of or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual, not to reconvene.
Motion to.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor? Selectperson Childs?
Yes.
Selectperson Elwood?
Yes.
Vice Chair Needham?
Yes.
And myself. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.